You can buy land in America right now for $799. Not a lease, not a timeshare, a deed. Your name on a piece of ground in the American West. I know that sounds insane. It's not. There are dozens of parcels across the emptiest counties in this country listed under $5,000 on verified platforms right now, and most of them come with something the listing doesn't mention. The question isn't whether the price is real. The question is what you're actually buying when you hand over the cash. Here's what's strange. These parcels show up on LandSearch, LandWatch, Land.com, legitimate platforms with real deeds and real cash prices. They're not scams in the legal sense. The title transfers, the money moves. But search through land investing forums, state agricultural reporting, and buyer communities, and you'll find a pattern that repeats itself across Kansas, Nebraska, New Mexico, and North Dakota. The land is real, the problems are real, and the gap between what the listing says and what the buyer discovers is almost always the same size. This isn't one unlucky buyer, this is a structure. Let's start with something that looks almost reasonable. Linn County sits in the southeastern corner of Kansas, right along the Missouri border. The county holds just over 9,700 people spread across more than 600 square miles. That's a population density low enough that you can drive for 20 minutes without passing another car. The nearest city with actual hospital infrastructure is roughly 30 miles out. For many people browsing cheap land, that sounds fine, manageable. You'd get used to it. The listing is for a 0.21 acre lot in Mound City, the county seat, which itself has fewer than 800 residents. Cash price? $3,900 according to LandSearch's land for sale under $5,000 in Kansas listings for 2025-2026. No owner financing. You wire the money, you get the deed. The parcel is approximately the size of a suburban backyard. Not a large suburban backyard, a standard one. The kind you'd mow in 20 minutes on a Saturday. Now here's where the math starts working against you. Municipal water access is likely reachable from a town-adjacent lot like this, which is the good news. The bad news is that if you want to build anything, a cabin, a small structure, anything that requires waste management, you're looking at a septic system. Septic installs in rural Kansas run between $10,000 and $20,000, depending on soil conditions and local permitting. That's a cost between 2.5 and 5 times the price of the land itself. And there's a known complication specific to Linn County lots that buyer forums have flagged repeatedly. Some parcels in this county have been documented as failing percolation tests. A perk test determines whether the soil can absorb effluent from a septic system at the rate required by code. If the soil fails, you legally cannot install a standard septic system. The lot becomes a lot you own but cannot develop. You've bought a legal liability wrapped in a deed. The January average temperature in this part of Kansas runs around 28 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough to freeze exposed pipes, but not the extreme cold you'll find further north in this video. That's actually one of this parcel's stronger selling points, climatically speaking. The drawback isn't the winter, it's the soil. Think about that for a moment. You hand over $3,900, cash, no financing, for a quarter-acre parcel. Then you spend between $10,000 and $20,000 trying to make it usable. Then you discover the ground itself won't pass the test that would let you install the system you just paid for. You're now deep in the hole on a piece of land in eastern Kansas that you legally own and practically cannot touch. Property taxes run roughly 1.3% annually on assessed value in Linn County, which on a $3,900 parcel isn't a crushing number. But those taxes keep coming every year, whether the land does anything for you or not. The land appreciates slowly in low-density rural counties like this, if it appreciates at all. You're not buying into a rising market, you're buying into a static one and paying carrying costs indefinitely. The lot is real, the deed is real, the septic math is more expensive than the land, and that's the mildest entry on this list. Forget the backyard comparison. This one is smaller. Cedar County, Nebraska sits in the northeastern corner of the state, wedged between the Missouri River and the South Dakota border. The county population runs just over 8,500 people. Coleridge, the town this parcel sits near, has roughly 400 residents. The landscape here is rolling plains and agricultural fields, the kind of terrain that looks open and free from a car window and increasingly isolating the longer you stay. The listing is for a 0.1 acre microlot in Coleridge. Cash price $2,500. Per Land Searches Nebraska under $5,000 listings for 2025-2026. That's 1/10 of an acre. To put that in physical terms, a standard single-car driveway is roughly 0.01 to 0.02 acres. A two-car driveway gets you to maybe 0.04. You're buying something closer in physical scale to a parking situation than a homestead site. The parcel is town adjacent, which means it's not raw wilderness. It's a platted lot in or near an existing small community. That's where the comparisons to off-grid living end hard. At 0.1 acres, this parcel is below the minimum size threshold for any independent off-grid build. You cannot place a standard septic system, you cannot drill a well with meaningful setback compliance, and you cannot build a structure with legal breathing room between property lines. What you can do is own it. Nebraska's climate adds a layer of severity that's easy to underestimate from a listing photo. The January average in northeastern Nebraska runs around 22 degrees Fahrenheit. The state's recorded low is minus 47 degrees Fahrenheit, documented in Campbell in 1989. That's not a historical curiosity. It's a climate profile that demands serious infrastructure for any habitation. Insulation, heating systems, weatherproofing, waterline burial depth measured in feet rather than inches. All of that costs money that the $2,500 purchase price doesn't include. The nearest hospital sits approximately 40 miles from Coleridge. In a medical emergency during a January storm on rural Nebraska roads, 40 miles is not a casual drive. This is documented territory for rural health analysts studying access gaps in the Great Plains. Not a hypothetical, not a worst-case scenario. It's a structural feature of living in low-density counties far from regional medical infrastructure. Rural Health Reporting has also documented a pattern among Nebraska buyers who purchase cheap parcels in sandhills-adjacent regions, expecting irrigation access or water availability. What several buyers found instead were water rights caps that prevented consistent supply, meaning the land exists, the deed is yours, but the water you assumed came with the territory is legally restricted. Cedar County sits outside the Sandhills proper, but the broader pattern of Nebraska water access assumptions catching buyers off guard is well established. Here's the real math on this one. You pay $2,500 for 1/10 of an acre. You cannot build independently on it. You cannot install water or waste systems with standard compliance. You own a piece of ground in a town of 400 people in a county of 8,500, 40 miles from the nearest hospital, in a state that has hit minus 47 degrees Fahrenheit. The price is real. Every word of the listing is accurate, and it's still, in practical terms, close to useless as a standalone purchase without connecting to municipal services that may or may not be extended to your specific parcel. That's $2,500 for the privilege of paying property taxes on a parking space. 1 full acre. That's what this listing is offering, for $2,100. Socorro County stretches across central New Mexico south of Albuquerque, covering an area of nearly 7,000 square miles, with a population of roughly 16,500 people. Vegueta is a small settlement in the Rio Grande Valley corridor, but the surrounding county is high desert. Elevation, aridity, and distance are the defining characteristics. The landscape is genuinely striking. Wide valley floors, distant mesa edges, sky that goes on longer than you think sky should go. It photographs well. It does not sustain human life easily. The listing, $2,100 for 1 acre near Vegueta. Cash price. Per Land Searches New Mexico under $5,000 listings for 2025-2026. 1 full acre, 43,560 square feet for the price of a used car with some miles on it. That's the number that gets people. That's the number that ends up screenshotted in group chats and sent to friends with "You seeing this?" as the message. Here's what the listing doesn't lead with. No water rights are included. In New Mexico, water rights are a separate legal instrument from land ownership. You can own the surface of the land and have zero legal right to the water beneath it or flowing near it. This isn't an edge case or a loophole. It's the foundational structure of water law in the arid West. Prior appropriation, senior rights, junior rights. If no water rights transfer with this parcel, you cannot legally draw from the ground, even if you drill. And drilling is expensive. Wells in this basin routinely exceed $15,000 to complete. That's more than 7 times the purchase price of the land. On top of that, the region sits in a documented high drought zone, receiving roughly 10 inches of annual precipitation. The New Mexico state record low is -50 degrees Fahrenheit, recorded in Gavilan in 1951. The nearest hospital runs approximately 35 miles out. In a county where infrastructure is sparse and the desert is not forgiving, that distance matters. Land investing analysts have reported a recurring pattern with New Mexico parcels in this price range. Buyers purchase what is marketed as a cheap homestead acre, discover no legal water rights attached, and then find that the soil conditions also make standard septic installation difficult or impossible. You're not just buying land without water, you're potentially buying land where neither water nor waste systems can be installed to code. The acre itself is real. 43,560 square feet in high desert New Mexico is genuinely yours for $2,100. Stand on it and you'll see a landscape that doesn't look cheap at all. Wide, quiet, old. But the cost of turning that acre into a place where a person can legally live is not $2,100. It's $2,100 plus a well that might cost $15,000, plus a septic system, plus whatever it costs to connect to any electrical infrastructure, plus the carrying cost of property taxes on land you can't use while you figure out how to fund the improvements. That acre is simultaneously one of the best deals and one of the worst purchases you can make in rural America. And both of those things are true at the same time. This one sits less than a mile from Canada. Pembina County occupies the far northeastern corner of North Dakota, pressed up against the Canadian border on one side and Minnesota on the other. The county holds roughly 6,800 people across nearly 1,100 square miles. Netchi, the town nearest to this parcel, has fewer than 400 residents. The border crossing at Pembina is the primary economic landmark in the area. The landscape is flat, agricultural, and in January, brutally cold in a way that's different in kind from cold places you've probably visited. The listing: $3,072 for a 0.34 acre lot near Nietzsche. Cash price: per land searches North Dakota under $5,000 listings for 2025-2026. Just over a third of an acre for roughly $3,000. The parcel is border adjacent in one of the most geographically isolated regions of the contiguous United States. The nearest hospital sits approximately 50 miles away. North Dakota has classified at least 18 of its counties as hospital deserts, regions where emergency medical access is structurally compromised by distance and provider scarcity. The temperature data here is not a footnote. The average January temperature in northeastern North Dakota drops to 2 degrees Fahrenheit. 2 degrees above zero is the average, not the record, not the worst case, the average. The state's all-time record low is -60 degrees Fahrenheit, documented in Mercer County in 1897. Modern infrastructure handles extreme cold better than it did in 1897, but the carrying cost of habitation in a climate like this, heating, insulation, buried utilities, vehicle reliability, road accessibility, is a permanent fixed expense that arrives every single winter. The border proximity adds a layer of administrative complexity that most buyers don't consider until it's relevant. Living within a mile of an international boundary involves proximity to federal border patrol activity, potential restrictions on certain types of construction or land use, and the psychological reality of existing at the absolute geographic margin of the country. It's not legally prohibitive. It's just a thing you live with. Western North Dakota reporting has documented buyers who purchased cheap parcels in the region, assuming water access was straightforward, only to discover saline soil conditions or aquifer limitations that made viable wells either technically difficult or prohibitively expensive. The same pattern appears in Pembina County area reports. Soil and water viability isn't guaranteed, and the cost of discovering that it isn't viable comes after you've already closed on the land. You're buying a third of an acre in a county averaging single-digit January temperatures 50 miles from the nearest hospital, a few hundred yards from another country. The price is $3,072. The infrastructure gap between that number and habitation is measured in tens of thousands of dollars and months of survivable winters. $799. That's the cash price. Valencia County sits south of Albuquerque in the Rio Grande corridor. Rio Communities, sometimes referred to in older plat documents as Rio del Oro, is one of those places that appears on maps, has an official name, shows up in county records, and is simultaneously not quite a real town in the way most people understand that term. The subdivision was platted in the 1960s as a speculative development, tens of thousands of individual lots carved from ranch land and sold by direct mail to out-of-state buyers who had never visited New Mexico and in many cases never would. The listing: $799 for a 0.25-acre lot in Rio del Oro, Rio Communities. Cash price. Per Land Search's New Mexico under $5,000 listings for 2025-2026. A quarter-acre of platted desert subdivision for less than $1,000. This is the number that circulates in land investing forums as the entry point for the New Mexico cheap lot phenomenon. And it's also the number that experienced land investors warn beginners about specifically. Here's the pattern, and it is extensively documented across state reporting and land investing analyst communities. The 1960s subdivision model in New Mexico involved selling paper lots, legally real parcels on a recorded plat, to buyers who assumed that because the lots were platted, infrastructure was either present or forthcoming. Roads, water, electricity, sewer. In most cases, none of those things materialized on the timeline buyers expected, or at all. The subdivision exists on paper. Parts of it have been partially developed. Most of it has not. Annual precipitation in this part of Valencia County runs around 9 inches, barely above the threshold for desert classification. No water rights are typically included with parcels in this subdivision. Property taxes run roughly 1.25% annually on assessed value, which on a $799 lot is almost nothing in dollar terms. But those taxes have been accumulating for decades on thousands of parcels that their owners never visited, never built on, and eventually forgot they owned. This is the part that takes a moment to absorb. These lots have been resold repeatedly, sometimes multiple times to different owners across different decades, without ever transitioning from a line on a plat map to an inhabited piece of land. You are potentially buying a parcel that has already been sold 3 times. All 3 buyers paid cash. All 3 got a real deed, and the land today looks exactly like it looked the day the original ranch was subdivided in 1963. Dirt, desert scrub, the outline of a road that was graded once and never maintained. The $799 price is not a mistake. It reflects the market's honest assessment of what this parcel is worth in its current state and with its current constraints. That's actually a more useful truth than you might expect. The listing isn't hiding that number, the number is the disclosure, but you should understand what $799 in a 1960s speculative New Mexico subdivision actually means. It means you're buying into a structure that has proven, over 60 years of repeated transactions, that the gap between ownership and use remains essentially unchanged. 60 years of buyers, the subdivision still isn't built. Before we get to the last entry, this one deserves its own stop. Because the isolation here isn't a feature of the land, it's a feature of the entire county. Cavalier County sits in the north-central part of North Dakota, roughly 20 miles south of the Canadian border. Total county population, 3,721 people. That number alone should reset your reference frame. The entire county, all of it, every resident, every household, could fit inside a single large urban apartment complex with room to spare. Sarles, the town nearest to this parcel, operates on the scale of a few dozen people. It has the structure of a town, a main street, some buildings, a name, and the population of a very small neighborhood. The listing? $1,832 for a 0.65-acre lot near Sarles. Cash price. Per Land Search's North Dakota under $5,000 listings for 2025 to 2026. 2/3 of an acre for under $2,000 in one of the lowest density counties in the contiguous United States. If you've been tracking the price per acre math across this video, this one looks like a relative deal. More land per dollar than most of the entries above it. The climate context repeats but intensifies. January averages in this part of North Dakota run around 2 degrees Fahrenheit, same as Pembina County. The North Dakota state record low is minus 60 degrees Fahrenheit. These aren't numbers for a history book. They define the infrastructure cost of living here permanently. Heating systems, insulation standards, vehicle reliability in extreme cold, road access during winter events, emergency response times when the nearest hospital sits approximately 45 miles away. Every single one of those factors costs money that doesn't show up in the $1,832 purchase price. Local agricultural press has reported specific complications with Cavalier County parcels that go beyond general cold climate concerns. The soils in parts of this county are characterized by high salinity levels, and aquifer variability makes well drilling outcomes unpredictable. A buyer can spend the money to drill a well and come up with water that is either too saline for regular use or insufficient in volume for a household. That's not a hypothetical, it's a documented complication that has appeared in agricultural and rural development reporting specific to this region. The nearest hospital at 45 miles becomes a more severe data point when you account for winter road conditions. A medical emergency in January in Cavalier County on a county road during a blizzard with temperatures at or below zero is not the same calculation as a 45-mile drive on a clear August afternoon. The distance is the same. The situation is different in every practical way. There's a particular kind of quiet that comes with 3,721-person counties that's different from other kinds of quiet. It's not the peaceful quiet of a weekend camping trip. It's the structural quiet of a place where the services, the commerce, the social density, and the medical infrastructure that most Americans consider baseline have either never existed or have been slowly contracting for decades. Cavalier County isn't a hidden gem waiting to be discovered. It's a place that has been exactly this empty for a long time, for reasons that don't resolve when a new buyer shows up with a deed. The land is 2/3 of an acre. The price is $1,832, and the county around it is slowly, quietly, getting emptier every year. None of the above compares to this one. Luna County occupies the southwestern corner of New Mexico, deep in the Chihuahuan Desert. The county seat is Deming, a town of just over 14,000 people that serves as the commercial hub for a region defined by distance, heat, aridity, and an annual precipitation total that sits right around 10 inches. The landscape is Chihuahuan Desert in the most uncompromising sense. Sparse vegetation, caliche soil, wide sky, midday temperatures in summer that routinely hit triple digits. It is visually dramatic and physically demanding in approximately equal measure. The listing, $1,299 for a 0.5 acre lot near Deming. Cash price. Per Land Search's New Mexico under $5,000 listings for 2025-2026. Half an acre in the Chihuahuan Desert for $1,300. You're going to think this sounds like a mistake. It's not. The price is real. The deed is real. And the situation this parcel puts a buyer in is documented at a scale that removes any possibility of calling it an edge case. Start with water. No water rights are disclosed with this parcel. In Luna County and the surrounding Chihuahuan Desert Basin, that is not an administrative detail. It is a survival-level constraint. The region sits on recurring federal drought monitor classifications that have continued through the 2020s without meaningful interruption. Groundwater in parts of this basin is either legally restricted, deeply buried, or of compromised quality. Drilling a well does not guarantee usable water, and if you cannot legally draw from the ground and cannot reliably access surface water, you truck it in. Trucked water in this region typically runs between $100 and $200 per fill. Think about what that means on an annual basis for a household with basic water needs. You're looking at a monthly water expense that, over a year, exceeds the purchase price of the land several times over. The land costs $1,299. 6 months of trucked water at the low end of the documented price range costs $600 to $1,200. The land costs less than a year's worth of the water required to live on it. I know that sounds like a budget exercise someone invented to make a point. It isn't. It's the math that actual buyers in this region have encountered. Then there's wildfire. Luna County and the surrounding Chihuahuan Desert parcels at this price point overlap with documented wildfire risk zones confirmed by state reporting. This isn't a theoretical future risk, it's a present tense overlay on some of the cheapest land in New Mexico. Low vegetation density doesn't eliminate wildfire risk in the Chihuahuan Desert, it changes its character. Dry grass, dried scrub, and caliche hard soil in a drought-persistent region means fire moves differently than it does in forested terrain, but it moves. The broader context for Luna County parcels at this price level is documented extensively by land investing analysts and state-level reporting. This county, and the surrounding desert region, contains tens of thousands of speculative parcels that were carved from ranch and federal-adjacent land over decades and sold, repeatedly, without ever transitioning to habitable use. Lots in this area change hands for under $2,000 so regularly that it has created its own microeconomy of parcel resellers. You buy a lot for $1,299. You hold it for a few years, paying minimal property taxes. You sell it for $1,500. The next buyer does the same. The land never gets a well. The land never gets a structure. The plat exists on a county map. The desert stays the desert. The population of Luna County runs about 24,000 people, larger than some of the other counties in this video, but concentrated in Deming. The rural parcels at this price point are not near Deming's services. They're on the margins, in subdivisions that look, on paper, what $5,000 gets you in the emptiest states: land, regret, or both. You can buy land in America right now for less than a used laptop. I'm talking about actual, deeded, legally transferable ground, parcels sitting in county records, listed on Land Search today, some under $800. I know that sounds insane. It's not. These listings are real, the prices are verified, and the counties are exactly as empty as you'd expect. But here's the part nobody puts in the listing description. Every single one of these parcels comes with a hidden invoice that can run 10, 15, even 20 times the purchase price. And the system selling them has no obligation to tell you that. Here's why you haven't heard this framed this way before. Real estate aggregators list the price. They don't list what happens after closing. LandSearch will show you a $799 lot and call it a deal. It won't mention that the subdivision it sits in has been resold, lot by lot, for 60 years without ever becoming a real place. Locals in these counties know this. Buyers from out of state often don't. And it's not one county, not one state. It's a pattern running from eastern Kansas to the Chihuahuan Desert, from the Nebraska border all the way to North Dakota's boundary with Canada. 7 parcels, 7 different ways to spend under $5,000 and receive something far more complicated than dirt. Let's start in eastern Kansas, in a county of just over 9,000 people, spread across a landscape of flat pasture, creek bottoms, and small towns that look like they've been running at half capacity since the 1980s. Linn County sits near the Missouri border, quiet in a way that's hard to describe until you've driven through it at dusk and counted more grain bins than streetlights. The listing that catches your eye here is $3,900, cash price, no owner financing, for a 0.21 acre lot in Mound City. That's the county seat. The price is sourced from Land Search, land for sale under $5,000 in Kansas, current through 2025-2026. For reference, 0.21 acres is roughly the size of a suburban backyard. Not a homestead, a backyard. Now on the surface this one looks like the most straightforward entry on the list. It's town adjacent, which means municipal water is likely accessible. You're not buying raw desert. Mound City is a real incorporated place with streets and infrastructure. The lot has an address, and at $3,900, you're paying about what a decent used car costs. But here's where the trichotomy starts. What you get: a small legal parcel in a rural county town, accessible by road with potential utility hookups. What you risk: nearly everything you'd need to make it functional. If you intend to build, even a small structure, even a shed with a bathroom, you'll need a septic system. Septic installs in this part of Kansas run between $10,000 and $20,000. That's not speculation. That's contractor range pricing for rural eastern Kansas in 2026. And there's a documented snag specific to Linn County. Lots in this area have been flagged on buyer forums. Real discussions, real buyers, real post-purchase frustration for failing perk tests. A perk test, short for percolation test, determines whether the soil can handle a septic system at all. If the soil fails, you can't build a conventional septic, which means you can't legally make the lot habitable. You've just paid $3,900 for ground that the county won't let you put a toilet on. The January average in this part of Kansas hovers around 28 degrees Fahrenheit. Not brutal by Great Plains standards, but cold enough that any construction work stalls seasonally. The nearest hospital sits approximately 30 miles out. That's a manageable distance, until it isn't. Property tax at a 1.3% rate on a $3,900 assessed value isn't going to break anyone's budget, but it's a perpetual obligation on land that may never generate any return. Here's the honest read on Linn County. This is the gentlest entry on the list. The climate is survivable. The distance to services is annoying but not life-threatening. The lot is real and the price is real. The problem is purely mathematical. You're buying a $3,900 asset that requires a minimum $10,000 investment before it can do anything, and there's a non-trivial chance the soil won't pass the test that unlocks that investment. You're not buying land and getting nothing. You're buying land and immediately facing a bill that is between 2 and 5 times what you just paid. That pattern, where the land costs less than the infrastructure required to use it, is going to repeat for the rest of this video, and it gets considerably more severe from here. Northeast Nebraska. Cedar County has a total population of around 8,500 people, spread across 751 square miles of agricultural plains. The county seat is Hartington. Most of the towns in Cedar County are the kind of places that have a grain elevator, a bar, and a post office, and 2 of those 3 might be open on a given Tuesday. The listing here is $2,500 for a 0.1 acre micro-lot in Coleridge, Nebraska. That price comes directly from Land Search, land for sale under $5,000 in Nebraska, 2025-2026. Cash price, no financing, 1/10 of an acre. Let's talk about what 1/10 of an acre actually is. It's roughly 4,356 square feet. For comparison, a standard parallel parking space is about 80 square feet. A suburban 2-car driveway runs somewhere around 400 to 600 square feet. This parcel is closer in physical scale to a driveway than to a homestead. The listing calls it land. Technically, that's accurate. Functionally, it is a footprint, barely enough for a single small structure and not enough for any meaningful off-grid system, even if the zoning allowed it. Coleridge is a real town of roughly 1,000 people. The parcel is town adjacent, which is the same situation as the Linn County lot. Potential utility access, existing infrastructure nearby. But the lot size alone eliminates any possibility of independent off-grid living. You'd be buying into a town lot so small that your options are hook into municipal services or don't build at all. Now add the Nebraska climate. The January average in northeastern Nebraska runs around 22 degrees Fahrenheit. That's colder than Linn County, Kansas, and this is the average, meaning regularly colder nights, regularly deeper cold snaps. Nebraska's state record low is minus 47 degrees Fahrenheit, recorded in Campbell in 1989. That number doesn't mean much for daily life, but it frames the range. When it gets cold here, it gets seriously cold, and it does so in a county where the nearest hospital is approximately 40 miles away. Rural health reporting out of Nebraska has documented a specific failure pattern that goes beyond this lot size problem. Buyers, particularly those looking at sandhills adjacent parcels, have purchased cheap land expecting irrigation water access, only to find that water rights caps in the region prevent consistent supply. On a town lot like this one, you're not farming. But the broader point holds. Water access in rural Nebraska is not guaranteed just because you own the ground. What you actually get for $2,500 here is a legal parcel in a small town, which is less useless than it sounds, but more limited than the price implies. If your goal is to own a small town Nebraska lot as a speculative hold, maybe the town grows, maybe a relative wants to build on it someday, $2,500 is a low-stakes bet. If your goal is a homestead, a retreat, an escape, a cabin, This parcel physically cannot deliver that. There's not enough square footage. You'd be building inside someone's yard. The honest drawback list: extreme cold, hospital 40 miles out, lot size incompatible with off-grid use, and a state-level water access environment that rewards buyers who understand water rights before they sign, not after. The $2,500 price is real. The limitations are proportional. 500 miles southwest, Socorro County, New Mexico. Population just under 16,600, across a county that stretches across volcanic terrain, desert basin, and the western edge of the Rio Grande Valley. Vegueta is a small community south of the county seat, surrounded by scrubland, low mesa, and the kind of silence that makes you aware of your own breathing. Here, the listing flips the script. Instead of a parking lot-sized micro-parcel in a Nebraska town, you're looking at a full acre, actually a full acre of New Mexico desert, for $2,100. Cash price. That number comes from Land Search, land for sale under $5,000 in New Mexico, 2025-2026. A full acre for $2,100 is a different proposition than the previous entries. It's real land you can walk. You can see all four edges from the middle. But the reason this acre costs $2,100 becomes clear the moment you ask about water. There are no water rights included in this parcel. None. This is not a disclosure buried in fine print. It's the structural reality of cheap land in this basin. Annual precipitation near Vegueta runs around 10 inches per year. For context, the Mojave Desert averages about 5 inches. This isn't quite Mojave dry, but it's close enough that rainfall is not a water strategy. You cannot collect enough rain here to sustain a household. If you want water on this land, you drill a well. Wells in this basin routinely exceed $15,000 to drill. The land costs $2,100. The water infrastructure costs more than 7 times the price of the land, and that's assuming the well hits anything viable, which is not guaranteed in every part of this county. New Mexico's documented failure pattern among cheap parcel buyers is specific and worth understanding before you put in a cash offer. Land investing analysts have tracked buyers who purchased rock desert lots across New Mexico after seeing them marketed as affordable homesteads. Post-closing, those buyers discovered 2 compounding problems: no legal water rights and poor septic soils. This isn't a Socorro County-specific scandal. It's a statewide characteristic of the cheapest tier of New Mexico land. The soil in high desert basins often doesn't perk, which means the 2 systems every habitable structure needs, water in and waste out, can both fail on the same parcel. The nearest hospital from this area runs approximately 35 miles. January temperatures here are more moderate than Nebraska or North Dakota, but Socorro County can drop hard in winter, and the state record low of -50 degrees Fahrenheit was recorded at Gavilan in 1951. Socorro County sits at elevation, and elevation means cold nights even in a desert climate. What does $2,100 actually buy you here? It buys you an acre of legally deeded, high desert land in a county of 16,600 people, with no water rights, no utility hookups, soils that may not support septic, and a well bill that starts at $15,000 before you know whether you'll get water. The land itself is real. The landscape is genuinely stark and open in a way that some people find compelling. But the gap between owning this land and living on this land is a financial chasm, not a manageable step. If you buy this parcel without solving the water question, you are the owner of a very affordable patch of desert that will remain exactly as it is now, indefinitely. Let's go north, all the way north. Pembina County, North Dakota sits in the northeastern corner of the state, sharing a border with Canada and a border with Minnesota. The population is approximately 6,844. The town of Netchie sits close enough to the international boundary that on a clear day you can see the Canadian tree line from a second-floor window. The listing is $3,072 for a 0.34-acre lot near Netchie, cash price, sourced from Land Search, land for sale under $5,000 in North Dakota, 2025-2026. About a third of an acre, not micro-lot territory, but not a homestead either. Somewhere in the ambiguous middle. The climate is where this entry separates itself. The January average temperature in northeastern North Dakota drops to 2 degrees Fahrenheit above zero. Not wind chill, average. Wind chill events push the effective temperature well below -20 degrees Fahrenheit on a regular basis. North Dakota's all-time state record low is -60 degrees Fahrenheit, recorded in Mercer County in 1897. That record has been standing for over a century, but the infrastructure that has to deal with those temperatures, pipes, foundations, vehicle batteries, fuel lines, deals with it every single winter. At least 18 North Dakota counties have been formally classified as hospital deserts. Pembina County is in that category. The nearest hospital from this parcel sits approximately 50 miles away. 50 miles on a clear August afternoon is a 45-minute drive. 50 miles during a North Dakota winter storm on a 2-lane highway with drifting snow and temperatures that kill a car battery in hours is something different entirely. Western North Dakota reporting has documented buyers who purchased cheap parcels across the state, assuming standard water access, and later found saline soil conditions or water-limited aquifer zones that made well drilling either prohibitively expensive or physically unproductive. The pattern in Pembina County and surrounding areas centers on agricultural soil profiles that don't translate to residential development. The land is cheap because it's at the edge of what anyone would choose to build on. There's something almost abstract about this parcel. It sits less than a mile from an international border, in a county of fewer than 7,000 people, in a state that gets genuinely dangerous cold for months at a time. The $3,072 price tag is real. The lot is real. The county record will show your ownership. But the county's infrastructure, roads, emergency services, utilities, medical facilities, was designed for agricultural operations and small communities, not for new residential development by out-of-state buyers looking for cheap land. The honest case for this parcel is minimal. If you are already in Pembina County, already have local connections, already know how to winterize a structure properly and maintain a vehicle in extreme cold, and already have a relationship with a local contractor, maybe. But for anyone buying this remotely, the math doesn't close. $3,000 for the lot, then a heating system capable of surviving 2 degrees Fahrenheit averages and -60 degrees Fahrenheit extremes, then water infrastructure, then a 50-mile buffer between you and a hospital. It's not a bad price for the dirt. It's a severe price for the total package. Back to New Mexico and into territory that requires a different kind of explanation entirely. Valencia County, specifically an area known as Rio del Oro, which is part of the broader Rio Communities Development Zone south of Albuquerque. The listing, $799 for a 0.25-acre lot. Cash price, under $800 for a quarter acre of desert in a county of over 76,000 people. That figure comes from Land Search, land for sale under $5,000 in New Mexico, 2025-2026. $799. That's less than a month of most people's car payment. It's less than a weekend as a mid-range hotel, and it buys you a quarter acre of legally deeded land. On paper, that's the best deal in this entire video. Here's what that $799 is actually attached to. Rio del Oro was platted as a subdivision in the 1960s, part of a broader wave of speculative land development that carved tens of thousands of lots out of New Mexico ranch land and sold them by mail to out-of-state buyers. The marketing was simple, affordable land in the sunny southwest. The reality was that the majority of these lots were sold to people who never visited, never built, and in many cases, never even drove past the parcel they now legally owned. This subdivision has been resold lot by lot, again and again, for over 60 years. It has never fully transitioned from paper plat to inhabited community. Land investing forums and state-level reporting have documented Rio del Oro and similar 1960s New Mexico developments as classic examples of speculative paper subdivisions, places where lots trade repeatedly for under $1,000, but where the physical landscape never meaningfully changes. There are no paved streets on significant portions of the plat. There is no water infrastructure. Annual precipitation here runs around 9 inches. The property tax rate runs roughly 1.25%. On a $799 assessed value, that's about $10 a year, essentially nothing. But property tax is perpetual. You will pay it whether the land is useful or not, whether you visit or not, whether you ever build or not. And because this lot is a quarter-acre of desert without water rights or utility access, the odds of it ever becoming something other than a recurring tax obligation are genuinely low unless you actively pursue the infrastructure, which, as the Socorro County entry already established, starts at $15,000 just for the well. Rio del Oro is the most important entry on this list for understanding why cheap land exists. It's not cheap because it was overlooked. It's not cheap because nobody knows about it. It's cheap because it has been cheap for 60 years, and the market has already priced in the fact that most buyers can't do anything with it. The subdivision's age is its testimony. If this land were buildable, serviceable, and viable, it would have been built on by now. 60 years of ownership transfers without development is not a coincidence. It is a data point. $799. The price is real. The land is real. The 60-year pattern of it going nowhere is also real. But none of the above fully prepares you for what the last two entries deliver. Let's go back to North Dakota, this time to Cavalier County, which sits in the north-central part of the state, well inland from any meaningful population center. Total county population, 3,721 people. You could fit every single resident of Cavalier County inside a single large urban apartment complex and still have units left over. The listing is $1,832 for a 0.65-acre lot near Sarles. Cash price, sourced from Land Search, land for sale under $5,000 in North Dakota, 2025-2026. That's almost 2/3 of an acre for under $2,000. More physical space than any entry we've covered so far, at a lower total price than most of them. Sarles itself has only a few dozen residents. The local infrastructure reflects that. The nearest hospital sits approximately 45 miles away. January averages here run around 2 degrees Fahrenheit, identical to the Pembina County entry, because northeastern North Dakota is consistently that cold. The state record low is -60 degrees Fahrenheit. These are not rhetorical temperature figures. They are the operating conditions for any structure you attempt to build, heat, maintain, or live in on this land. Cavalier County parcels have been reported in local agricultural press as particularly difficult to convert to residential use. The reason is saline soils. Parts of this county have soil chemistry that creates drainage problems, limits what can be grown, and raises questions about aquifer quality. Saline soils don't automatically mean a well is impossible, but they do mean that drilling for water in Cavalier County carries an extra layer of uncertainty about what you'll find and whether it'll be potable. Think about the arithmetic of this parcel in full. You're paying $1,832 for the land. If you want water, you're looking at a well that will cost well into 5 figures, and there's a documented uncertainty about aquifer viability in parts of this county. If you want heat, you need a structure built to survive 2 degrees Fahrenheit averages and the periodic violence of a North Dakota cold snap. If you need a hospital in an emergency, you're planning a 45-mile drive in conditions that can make 45 miles take hours. You are 45 miles from the nearest emergency room in a county that gets -60 degrees Fahrenheit record lows. That's not a rural inconvenience. That's a risk that requires honest accounting before you spend $1,832. The scale of the isolation here is something worth sitting with. Cavalier County has 3,721 people. That is, by any urban measure, not a community. It's a dispersal pattern. People are spread across hundreds of square miles of flat, cold, wind-exposed agricultural land. The few dozen residents of Sarles are not a support network for a newcomer arriving with a $1,832 lot and a plan. There are no contractors lined up for new builds. There is no local economy built around residential development. The county exists, economically, around agriculture, and has for generations. This lot delivers on both counts of the video's frame simultaneously and without apology. You get real land, you get real acreage, and you get a set of conditions that will cost you a multiple of your purchase price before the land does anything. That combination is exactly what $1,832 buys in Cavalier County. And then there's this one. Luna County, New Mexico. Deming is the county seat, a small desert city of about 24,000 people situated in the Chihuahuan Desert, roughly 60 miles west of Las Cruces and 30 miles north of the Mexican border. The landscape is low, flat, and dry, in a way that photographs make look sparse and presence makes feel absolute. The sky here is enormous, the ground is hard. The listing: $1,299 for a 0.5-acre lot near Deming. Cash price: half an acre of Chihuahuan Desert. That figure comes from Land Search, land for sale under $5,000 in New Mexico, 2025-2026. $1,300. I'm going to tell you straight, this might be the most honest listing on this entire list, because the gap between what you pay and what you'd need is so extreme, it functions almost as a warning label written in numbers. Let's start with water, because in Luna County, everything starts with water. Annual precipitation here runs around 10 inches. The land comes with no disclosed water rights. None. If you want to live on this parcel, consistently, not just camp on it occasionally, you need water delivered by truck. Trucked water in this region costs between $100 and $200 per fill, depending on distance and provider. A standard household uses roughly 80 to 100 gallons per day. A 1,500-gallon tank fill at $150 is gone in about 2 weeks of normal household use. That's $300 per month, conservatively. 6 months of trucked water, a rough half-year operational cost, runs between $1,800 and $3,600. The land costs $1,299. 6 months of the water needed to actually live on it costs more than the land. I know that sounds like a math error. It's not. Luna County sits inside federal drought monitor classifications that have been active and recurring throughout the 2020s. This is not a temporary dry spell. It's a structural characteristic of the Chihuahuan Desert that has been documented, classified, and reconfirmed year after year. The cheapest parcels in the county overlap with wildfire risk zones confirmed by state reporting. This is semi-arid scrubland subject to sustained drought. Fire is not a remote possibility in those conditions. It's a seasonal reality that emergency management in this region plans around every single year. Luna County and the surrounding Chihuahuan Desert have been documented in state reporting and by land investing analysts as containing tens of thousands of speculative parcels, a pattern structurally similar to what Rio del Oro represents in Valencia County, but extending across a much larger geography. Cheap desert lots in this region have been sold, resold, and sold again, repeatedly, without transitioning to inhabited home sites at meaningful scale. The pattern has been running long enough that analysts who track land sales in New Mexico treat sub-$2,000 desert lots in Luna County as a recognizable asset class. Legally real, economically speculative, practically limited. Think about what you need to close the gap between owning this parcel and living on this parcel. You need a water solution, either a well at north of $15,000, again with no guaranteed water rights, or an ongoing trucked water contract that costs more per year than the land itself. You need a structure built to handle Chihuahuan desert extremes, summer temperatures regularly above 95 degrees Fahrenheit, winter nights that can drop below 20 degrees Fahrenheit, and a wildfire risk profile that requires defensible space clearance and fire-resistant building materials. You need a vehicle capable of navigating desert roads, because the cheap parcels are not on paved streets. And you need a risk tolerance for a county that sits inside recurring federal drought classifications with no near-term resolution in sight. Here's the thing about $1,299. At that price, you're not making a real estate investment in any conventional sense. You're making a bet. You're betting that the land will appreciate, or that you'll find a way to develop it cheaply, or that water access will somehow resolve itself, or that the wildfire risk will stay theoretical. Some of those bets occasionally pay off. The majority of sub-$1,500 Chihuahuan desert lots have not paid off for the buyers who made them over the past several decades, and the evidence is the ongoing supply of identical parcels cycling through the same listing platforms at the same prices, generation after generation. Luna County has real appeal. The The sky at night here is something that urban dwellers pay significant money to experience on vacation. The landscape is genuinely starkly beautiful in the way that extreme places tend to be. Deming has a functioning small city infrastructure. None of that changes the water math, the drought classification, the wildfire overlay, or the 60-year pattern of these parcels not transitioning to homes. $1,300 for half an acre in a place where the water costs more than the land, where the drought never quite ends, and where the parcel has almost certainly changed hands before, possibly more than once, without ever having a house built on it. That is what $1,299 buys in Luna County, New Mexico. Every fact in that sentence is verifiable. Ask any local in Deming who has watched these lots cycle through the market for the past 30 years. They'll tell you the same thing. A Rio del Oro quarter acre that's been reselling for under $800 for 60 years without ever becoming a neighborhood. A Cavalier County 2/3 acre in a county of 3,721 people, where January averages 2 degrees Fahrenheit and the hospital is 45 miles out. These aren't outliers. They're endpoints of the same spectrum. The real question this video leaves open is not whether these prices are real. They are. The question is, at what price does land stop being an asset and start being a recurring obligation dressed up as ownership? That line is different for every buyer, and every parcel on this list sits right on it. Which one of these 7 would you actually buy, and what would you do with it? Not ideally, not theoretically, actually. Drop it in the comments. And if this format is useful to you, subscribe. There are a lot more parcels like these, and most of them are still sitting in county records, waiting for someone to ask the right questions.